trying to trace back to when I became attracted to a woman's throat. With that, all you think all belong to you.
Are any bodies buried anywhere?
Wait until I get to
Welcome to the Crime Wall with Cass and Mo, where we post weekly videos giving you real crime stories, commentary, and highlights for crime lovers. If you love crime stories, then the Crime Wall is for you. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell so you can be notified when we post our next story to the Crime Wall. This week, we are going to be covering a case about a person who is actually even more demonic than Ted Bundy himself or any other noted serial killer in the United States. Today's Crime Wall story is about Sam Little. In his own words, God in heaven knows I didn't have the power to stop. He made me. Sam Little was born in Reynolds, Georgia on June 7, 1940. The total is to give you an idea of how small this town was according to the 2020 United States Census. There were only 926 people, 486 households, and 229 families residing in the city. Back when Sam Little was born in 1940, the population was not that much bigger, with about 1,253 residents. Who knew out of those 1,253 people, the most prolific and deadliest serial killer in the United States would be born?
During interviews, Sam Little claimed his mother was a prostitute, which may have given some deeper context, to the selection of his victims. His mother's name was Bessie Mae Little, and as previously mentioned, it was believed that she was a teenage sex worker. Authorities also believe that Miss Little actually gave birth to Sam while she herself was in jail. And at birth, his last name was not Little, but McDowell. So he was born in Georgia, but Bessie Little decided to relocate to Lorain, Ohio, where she would abandon Sam on the side of the road as a baby. It was said that Little was raised by his grandmother, which her name was Fannie Mae McDowell. She raised him located on Macon Street in Ohio. But there's little discussion about his father. According to various articles, his name was listed as Sam and Paul McDowell, and he was 19 years old when Little was born. McDowell would become a well-known alias, though, that Sam Little would later use to help confuse authorities as he continued to travel on his killing trips.
Sam Little said that at the age of 7 or 8, he knew he wanted to hurt people by strangling them. And he realized at the time he loved necks. Yes, the décolleté. He was obsessed with pretty necklines. He was already having problems as a child, though, because he started small criminal activities as early as 13 years old. He ultimately got caught for stealing and was sent to a reformatory school for teenage boys around this time as well. And on his contact card, it listed mother whereabouts unknown. It's clear his hatred for women was definitely something he started to feel as a young child. He would later be known to have other 47 discipline records in just the 1 year he was at the first reformatory school. And by the age of 15 or 16, he was just roaming around the streets of Ohio, stealing to survive. He would later be caught and arrested for burglary in Omaha, but it wasn't until his 20s that the deadly demon in him started to be released.
So how exactly did he end up from Ohio to Miami? Well, it seemed that Little's mother, Bessie Mae, somehow came back into the picture, but he made it down to South Florida to go see his mom. Traveling obviously was also in both of their blood because they surely moved around. She later was known to provide cleaning or some type of maid services as her occupation. But is this why he will ultimately decide to only head to South Florida, specifically Miami, where he unfortunately would kill his first victim and get his first taste of what killing by strangulation would feel like? His first victim was documented to be known as Mary Brosley, and she was killed in 1971. So Little would be about, let's say, 30 years old, which when he met Mary Brosley, she was 33 years old at the time. Now, according to police documents, Brosley was also an alcoholic and was detached from her family. She frequented the local bars in Miami, but her last known party location would be on New Year's Eve in 1970.
But due to her addiction, she became very distant and one day just disappeared, leaving her 7-year-old son named Daryl Brosley. So the last time her family actually saw her was on June 12th. Mary had a rough life due to her addiction, but to her family, she was a loving person that unfortunately just lost her way due to the alcohol. She was unfortunately anorexic and only weighed about 80 pounds, despite her being 5'4". With her being so tiny and consuming so much alcohol, she was often inebriated, which I'm sure clouded her judgment, as she was known to get in cars with anyone who would supply her with alcohol. Her sister would tell investigators that her sister was physically sick and was in a very abusive marriage. Now, all of these triggers would ultimately lead her to disappearing and heading to Miami in hopes to start a new life. Unfortunately, her life would only last 6 months until Sam Little fell in love with her neck. It's crazy how Sam Little could remember so much about his victims, but she would be the start to a number of future murders, ultimately naming him the deadliest serial killer in the U.S. He told investigators he remembered her wearing a flowered sundress and a chain necklace, and that she also had a limp.
Unfortunately, a father and son would stumble across Mary's poor little body that was so decomposed to where she was unrecognizable. And unfortunately, medical examiners were not able to conclusively confirm what exactly killed her back in 1971. Sam Little would later tell investigators he only partially buried her because the ground floor was too hard and he would never bury someone again in Florida. There was also another unmatched confession about a victim named Mary Ann, whose murder possibly took place in 1971 or 1972. Mary Ann was an 18 or 19-year-old transgender, and the body was left in the Everglades near Highway 27. Now, Little said that he remembered her name as Mary Ann or Mary Ann. He also informed investigators that Mary Ann was about 5'6" or 5'7" and weighed about 140 pounds. Samuel Little claims to have strangled more than 93 people between 1970 and 2005, though many of his victims' deaths were first ruled as accidental or overdoses. Many of Little's victims' bodies were never found, and the confessions that he provided, along with a sketch, could not be matched to a known missing person.
Sam Little confessed to over 93 victims, but we are only going to cover a few during this episode. So let me introduce you to a cold case that was solved only because Sam Little started to confess. This victim's name was Patricia Mount. He would end up in Gainesville because he was traveling with a girlfriend and a driver, and he would go out and pick up women. Mount was last seen at May's Lounge, a bar that we know today as Fletcher's in Gainesville, Florida, off of Fifth Avenue. It's crazy to say that me and my sister both regularly went to the same bar that Mount was picked up from. As he described the bar and how he sat at the end of the table, I could see flashbacks of the very small, what we used to call a hole in the wall. We've spent some really fun nights at this club, but it was so shocking to envision Patricia Mount back during this time trying to enjoy herself as well, but it would ultimately lead to her death due to Little. Little stated his only reason for going into the bar was to pick up a woman, and if he liked her neck, she would be the one. Little did what most men do in clubs. He offered to buy Mount and her girls drinks because he obviously tried to be a ladies' man to hide his true demon on the inside. With excitement in his voice, he would tell investigators how he pulled off on a dirt road and started massaging her neck and then tightened the grip till she couldn't breathe. It was during this confession that Little attempted to show some sort of empathy, as he said he was sorry and that he had a curse or mental deficiency and that strangling women turned him on. It always was an obsession and continued to be an obsession, and as a result, it continued to feed his desires. The unfortunate thing is the only photo they had of this victim was a mugshot or booking photo that was taken on January 29, 1982. And they couldn't find the details of that arrest. And to be honest, it doesn't even matter. Investigators also reported that Mount was a resident of Talkachali, but back then it was called Sunland Training Center, which was a state facility for the developmentally disabled people right on Waldo Road. She would later be murdered from that time stamp 9 months later at the early age of 26 years old. He would later be acquitted of this murder, and due to double jeopardy clause in the Fifth Amendment, he couldn't be prosecuted for the same crime twice. They are still looking for any known family members of Patricia Ann Mount.
Sam Little seemed to unfortunately stay in the Gainesville, Ocala area, as he would also confess to the killing of Rosie Hill, who only moved to Ocala, Florida to live with her grandparents because she had become pregnant in high school. Now, according to her mother, it was known back in the days that people of color would move to live with grandparents or other family members when their families got bigger. But Minnie Hill never knew this move would unfortunately play a role in Rosie meeting Sam Little. It has to be such a hard life to live, not knowing what happened to your child for decades, as Minnie holds up this photo describing her pain, but also her ability to forgive Sam Little for a crime that took her daughter's life. Rosie would be killed, leaving a 2-year-old baby, according to her mother.
The FBI task force, also known as VICAP, known as VICAP, still has a number of these unsolved cases in their database where they compile tons of criminal activities and details to try and match them to various cases that show some types of patterns.
Can you believe this man actually had a longtime girlfriend that was much older than him that he met in 1971? Now, her name was Aurelia Jean Dorsey, and she is also deceased now, but she was no innocent older lady, definitely not a grandmotherly type. It is known that she helped provide a tip while she was locked up to a man being tried on charges of sodomy and aggravated assault. Dorsey had gained the trust of Little's current girlfriend named Lucy Madero, as they were both incarcerated together. Now, her tip helped this man get off on his charges because the defense was given these tips from Dorsey. Was this an early sign that she would already be comfortable with the demonic things that her soon-to-be boyfriend Sam Little was into? Yes. It is Sam Little that she helped provide this tip for, which ultimately helped him get a not guilty verdict. Now, her and Little remained a pair until her death in Los Angeles in 1988. Little says she was no beauty and 30 years his senior, but he admired her loyalty. Reports reveal that she taught and aided Little by shoplifting to help provide money for them to travel and get by. I strongly believe, in my opinion, she was very well aware of his dark obsessions because she came to his defense on a number of times.
Some reports also claim that Little's criminal rap sheet is one of the most extensive in history, along with being the deadliest serial killer in the U.S. His murders could have been stopped around the 80s, but he continued to find his way out of jail by short sentences, good behavior, or not guilty verdicts. Thank you so much to the science of DNA and people who just wanted to find justice for the victims. According to reports, he was eventually caught on a narcotics charge while living in a homeless shelter. This is where Little met his match with science because his DNA was now able to be linked to the multiple murders from the 80s. Little would later become convicted of 3 murders and was sentenced to 3 life sentences. His last murder that we were made aware of was when he was 65. People are still curious as to why this man claimed his innocence for years and then all of a sudden decided to cooperate with authorities. After research, it seems sickening that he got pleasure out of retelling his crimes and what he did to his victims. VICAP has helped piece some type of similarities to help identify the connections to help law enforcement find tips or answers to gaps in their own cases, as most criminals usually follow patterns. Little died on December 30th, 2020 in Los Angeles County Area Hospital. Although California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation sources indicate no final determination as to the specific cause of death, Little suffered from diabetes, heart problems, and other health conditions. Little did you know that there was someone out there worse than Ted Bundy or even John Wayne Gacy.
Reminder for all to be safe. Please share our breaking news that we post on our Instagram. And until next time, Crime Wall family, be safe. Reminder for all to be safe. Share our breaking news from our Instagram. And until the next time, Crime Wall family, if there's any part of this story that you would like to request to have updated or feel is inaccurate, please feel free to let us know and we will do a victim update. We also want to know if there's any type of fund that you have set up for the victims that we can link in our description box for your loved ones to support any causes you have set up in loving memory of them. Those forms will be linked in the description box below.
Crime Wall family, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so that you can keep in contact with us and the next story to post to the Crime Wall with Cass and Mo.
Marianne about 5'7", 5'6". She weighed about 135,
Okay.
maybe 140.
And how old do you think she was?
But she was 19.
Okay. And where was she from?
Miami, down in Liberty City.
Okay. And did she, you mentioned before she had a boyfriend, or she talked about a boyfriend?
Named Wes.
Wes.
Yeah.
And tell me about where you met her at.
I seen her down at the Guar on 17th Avenue, and she had on a short cream miniskirt. Cream and red. So then this opportunity popped up. Take her to the store.
Right.
Still, we bring it back to the apartment. I went down 27th Street. That's going down to Fort Lauderdale, called the Alligator Alley. It runs into the Alligator Alley.
Right.
But the further out you get, the further you get out of Miami.
Right.
And you got vegetation.
Now, how far outside of Miami did you work?
About, it wasn't